The snow was falling in silence that morning, thick and endless, as if the sky itself wanted to bury the war. Somewhere in eastern France, near a village called Holzwihr, a 20-year-old Texan stood watching the white horizon turn black with smoke. His name was Audie Murphy, a name that, at the time, meant nothing. Just another soldier, another number in a war that had already swallowed millions. He wasn't tall. He wasn't muscular. And when he first tried to enlist, the army told him no. Too small, too young, too weak. But war doesn't measure strength the way the world does. And by 1945, this too small kid had already fought through Sicily, Italy, and France, leading men twice his size through hell itself. The story really began 2 years earlier, in a dusty Texas town during the Great Depression. Audie was the sixth of 12 children, born to a poor farming family. By the time he was 16, his father had vanished, leaving him to care for his younger siblings. He hunted rabbits and birds not for sport, but to feed them. That cold hunger taught him two things: how to shoot straight and how to never give up. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941, Audie lied about his age to join the army. The Marines rejected him. The paratroopers rejected him. Even the Navy said no. Finally, the U.S. Army infantry took him in, a skinny boy barely 55, weighing less than 110 pounds. No one in that recruitment office knew that this boy would become the most decorated American soldier in history. Fast forward to January 26, 1945. The 3rd Infantry Division had been fighting for weeks without rest. The ground was frozen, the air cut like glass, and the Germans were preparing one last desperate counterattack. Murphy's unit was assigned to defend a small position near the woods. They had little ammunition left and almost no cover. Then, through the thick fog, came the sound every soldier dreaded, the grinding roar of tank treads. German panzers. The earth shook, trees split apart. And Audie Murphy's men began to panic. He could see their fear, the same fear he'd felt 100 times before. He gave one command: "Fall back to the tree line, I'll cover you." They hesitated. "You'll be killed," one shouted. Murphy didn't answer. He just ran toward a burning American tank destroyer, flames licking its metal skin, ammunition cooking off inside. It was madness, but inside that wreck was a mounted .50 caliber machine gun. And Audie Murphy, bleeding from his leg, climbed onto the burning hull and pulled the trigger. The roar of that gun split the silence of the snow. He fired at the advancing German infantry, waves of them, shadows moving through the smoke. They fired back, bullets slicing through the flames around him, shells exploding meters away. Still, he didn't move. When the gun overheated, he grabbed a rifle. When that ran dry, he went back to the machine gun. He was alone, surrounded, standing on a tank that could explode at any moment, yet he refused to leave. For over an hour, Murphy held his ground. He radioed artillery strikes, shouted coordinates into the static, and kept firing until the German attack began to crumble. And then silence. The enemy was gone. They'd retreated, leaving dozens of dead behind. Audie Murphy climbed down from the smoking tank, his leg bleeding, his face covered in soot. He limped back to his men, who stared at him like they were seeing a ghost. He simply said, "They're gone, let's move forward." But this was not the end of his story. That day would make him a legend, but the price he paid for survival, the things he saw, the screams he remembered, would follow him for the rest of his life. Because when the guns go quiet, the war doesn't always end. To be continued in Chapter 2, The War After the War, where Murphy faces his greatest battle, not on the front lines, but inside his own mind. When the war ended, the world celebrated. But for Audie Murphy, peace was a stranger he couldn't recognize. He came home to Texas as a national hero, the most decorated American soldier of World War II. He'd earned every major combat award for valor that the United States could give. Medals glittered on his chest. Photographers followed his every step. And people cheered his name as if he were bulletproof. But behind that famous smile was a man who couldn't sleep through the night. The battles he fought overseas had ended. But inside his head, they had only just begun. He woke to the sound of gunfire that wasn't there. He dove for cover when a car backfired. In his dreams, he was still on that burning tank, hearing the screams, smelling the smoke, watching his brothers die again and again. Today we call it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Back then they called it shell shock. And no one wanted to talk about it. Audie did what he always did, he kept fighting. Hollywood soon came knocking. Murphy's story had captured the imagination of an entire nation. They offered him roles in war films, but none as powerful as the one based on his own life. To Hell and Back. When the cameras rolled, Audie wasn't acting. He was reliving the war that haunted him. Every explosion, every shout, every bullet that whizzed past on set, they weren't just sound effects to him. They were ghosts. He said later, "I guess I was trying to exorcise some demons." The film became a massive success, one of Universal's biggest hits. Millions watched the real Audie Murphy play himself, the man who faced death and won. But fame didn't bring him peace. He donated much of his money to help veterans and families of fallen soldiers, because he knew the hidden pain that followed them home. By his 30s, Murphy's life was a contradiction, a national idol, yet deeply tormented. He spoke publicly about the trauma soldiers carried, long before the world had words for it. At night, he slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow. Not out of paranoia, but because he could never quite convince himself the war was truly over. Despite everything, he never stopped serving. He fought for those who couldn't, spoke for those who were silent, and lived with the weight of 1,000 memories no man should bear. Then, on May 28, 1971, the hero who survived countless battles met his end in a quiet Virginia hillside. Not from gunfire, not from war, but in a plane crash, just days before his 46th birthday. The nation mourned. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery, his grave one of the most visited of all. And even in death, the boy from Texas, the one who wasn't supposed to be strong enough, big enough, brave enough, stood taller than ever. They say heroes are born. But Audie Murphy proved they're made in the fire, in the fear, and in the refusal to surrender even when the world says you're finished. His story isn't just about courage. It's about the cost of it. Because sometimes the hardest war to win is the one that follows you home.